Good evening, everybody. I welcome you all for the Knowledge Tuesday session. I'm Archana from HTIC MedTech Incubator hosting the session. Before we start, I would request all the participants to stay on mute and kindly unmute yourself while you speak. We have also created a feedback form for the session. So I request all the participants to fill the feedback form at the end of the session for us to improve in the upcoming Knowledge Tuesday sessions. The speaker for the today's session is Mr. Siddharth Jain, CEO and Chief Medical Device Regulatory Advisor, Symbiorph Clinical Trialogy. And the topic for the session is US FDA 510K requirement for medical device and IVD startups. Over to you, Siddharth. Siddharth? I think you're on mute, Siddharth.
Yeah, mute, right. Yeah, now it's fine. Understand.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Sure. So good evening to all of you. So our today's session is on what are the requirements of entering into the USA market. If you are manufacturers of medical devices and in vitro diagnostic devices, so what are the regulatory strategies you should employ to market your product into the USA? So as you all know that each country has a different sets of requirements. So for Europe, the requirement is CE certifications. For India, we are right now talking about the manufacturing license. And similar way, if you would like to enter into the USA market, we have to apply for the 510K. So 510K is a registration number which you will be getting once your product will get registered in the US FDA. Next slide. Yeah, so a 510K is a pre-market notification, one of the major pathway for bringing the device into the market. If you would like to enter into the USA market, yeah, fine. So what will be the learning objectives of the today's session will be to understand how the classification will be working when you are going for the 510K, to understand what are the different types of 510K, to understand what are the content which is going to required when you would like to submit the 510K to the FDA, and also what are the process including how and when the FDA will communicate and some with the submitters regarding the 510K, and what will be the decisions taken by the 510K whenever you would like to go ahead with it. So these are the 4 or 5 objectives, learning objectives you will came to know from today's session. So we have to develop the regulatory strategy. So how to develop a regulatory strategy for your product? So the first and important thing is to describe your device. Then we have to define what is the intended use of the device. What is the environment of use, where is going to be get used. The environment over here, it means that whether it's used in the controlled environment like under the operation theater or at the hospitals or at the end users house. So depending upon that, the regulatory strategy will remain the change, will get changed. Further to that, what category it will fit into it. For the medical devices, US FDA has a different categories starting from the 21 CFR parts 862 to 892. We have to see. I will be going to give you a brief about what are the different this 24 CFR. Then further we have to classify the devices with respect to class 1, 2, and 3. Then what are the product code, because each and every devices had a different product codes as per the requirement of the US FDA. We have to identify these product codes. What are the submissions requirements? What are the similar product available on the market? It means that what if the product has already a predicate device with you, then the process of 510K or registering your device in the USA will become more faster. So the identification of predicate device is very important for any sorts of devices. What are the applicable standards or guidance document? If there's any applicable standard like the ISO or ASTM standard is available, so we have to follow that standard. Or if that standard is not available, then we have to follow the guidance documents. So for many of the products, the US FDA have released the guidance documents. So we have to prepare the 510K application with respect to that guidance document, and accordingly we have to submit it. And which countries are targeted, depending upon the countries which you would like to target, we have to do the regulatory strategy. Yeah, next slide. So I will be starting with the device classification as it relates to the 510K. how to classify your devices accordingly. Fine. Yeah. Next slide. So as you all know that if you have attended my last sessions for the C certification, I also talk about the class 1, class 2 and class 3, right? In a similar way in US FDA also there are the three class 1, 2 and 3. Class 1 is for the low risk devices, subject to there are general controls. Most but not all class 1 devices are exempt from pre-market notification. It means that if your product is a class 1, so most of the class 1 products are 510k exempted. It means that you don't have to follow the entire route of 510k document preparation, submission and applications. For the 510k exempted product, the process of getting the US FDA clearance is much faster. You can able to get it within the time frame of maximum 15 to 20 days. You can able to get the class 1 US FDA approval from the government of USA. If you are having a class 2 product which is fall under the moderate risk devices, they are again subject to general and special control. General and special control, it means that your facility, they need to have a GMP facility. It means that you should implement the 21 CFR 820.20, and that 21 CFR 820.20 is nothing but about the requirement of ISO 13485. But USA has some enhanced requirement with respect to their GMP. So we have to implement the 21 CFR 820.20. It is a compulsion requirement. And once you have start selling your product at any period of time, within period of 1 to 2 years, the surprise inspection by the US FDA auditors can happen at your facility. So you have to make sure that the 21 CFR 820.20 is implemented into your system. Now, suppose if you are having a class 3 product, we call it a high risk device. So in that case, we are not going for the 510K, we are going for the PMA approval. PMA means pre-market approval. And for the PMA higher risk devices, the average timeline of getting the PMA approval from the US FDA is around 2 years. And we have to submit the clinical data of the USA. It means that you have to conduct some of the studies in USA also if your product is falling under the class 3 PMA route. Yeah. Next slide. So as I told you that there are different parts, and depending upon that parts, you have to choose that in which device classification or device regulatory number will be get applicable to you. Suppose if you are manufacturing a cardiovascular device, or you are manufacturing an ear, nose or throat device, so you have to follow the 21 CFR 874, or you have to follow the 21 CFR 870. And further, if you go inside that different parts, there will be a different subcategories starting. So depending upon your product intended use, you have to define that regulatory number for your devices. So depending upon the product intended use, you have to select from these different parts, starting from the 21 CFR 862 to 892, depending upon your device intended use. Right. So the next slide. So I talk to you about the class 1. So class 1 is the least risk, minimal potential for harm and simple design. Most of the products, they are the 510K exempted. Some of the examples are the elastic bandages, examination gloves and the oxygen masks. So establishment registration and device listing is required for the commercialization for all the devices classes. It means that even though if your product is a 510K exempted, in that case also the establishment registration and a device listing is mandatory for you. I will be talking in depth in my later or slides what you mean by the establishment registration and device listing. Next slide. So for the class 2 means the present with the greater concerns, subject to control. Like control may include a special labeling requirements, mandatory performance standard, and post-marketing surveillance. They are the few of the controls which the US FDA will going to look into it. You will be having a special labeling. You have to prepare the labeling as per the US FDA labeling requirements. You also have to have the performance standards carried out as per the IC 60601 or for the other type of standard, either ISO or ASTM standard. You have to identify, and then accordingly you have to carry out for the performance testings. for your products. Some of the examples are include power wheelchairs, infusion pumps, and surgical instruments. They are the typical some of the examples for your products. Next slide. Yeah, for the class 3, it is a higher risk devices, which represent the new technology, which is less than 10% of the devices, subject to more stringent controls. Bench and animal testings are required. Human clinical data submission of pre-market approval application. What we are right now talking about, the PMA, is required over to do over there. FDA will determine the PMA contains sufficient valid scientific evidence to assure that a device is safe and effective. It means that all the safety, efficacy, and performance data with respect to your device, we have to provide well in detail. We have to follow the requirement of ISO 14155 version 2020, which is just released around 1 week ago. The new standard for conducting the clinical investigations of the medical device has been released by the European Commission also, and also the same standard has been adopted by the US FDA also. So it means that you have to follow, whenever you would like to go for the clinical validation studies for your medical devices, you have to follow the requirement of ISO 14155 version 2020 versions. Some of the examples of typical class 3 products include are the hard walls, hearing aids, hip implants, CT scanners, lasers. There are a few of the higher risk devices which is typically be required. So typically the timeline for getting the PMA approval from the US FDA is around 2 years timeline. You have to give it, because a well detailed applications we have to submit. We have to do a lot of work in terms of document preparation, submissions, and typically the US FDA government will take approximately 1 year, 1.5 year timeline to get the process review or get your file review for the clearance of PMA, or to get your PMA approval for your class 3 devices. So what are the product codes? So whenever you would like to go for the classifications, so one of the important thing is to know, or you would like to identify the predicate device for your products which you are right now manufacturing. So the knowledge of having a product code is very important. It means that product code is a 3-letter words or 3-letter codes. It is used to identify and track the similar medical devices. Similar medical device means the predicate device which is already available. Used by the 510K submitters to search for the predicate device. It also helps in searching the predicate devices available. Found on most 510K clearance letter. If you see a typical 510K clearance letter from the US FDA, you will find these 3-letter codes on each and every 510K clearance letter. So the knowledge and identification of product codes is very important for your products, because with that product code you can able to classify, or you can also help in identification of predicate devices. Yeah, and the next slide. So these are the guidance document. You can go on these links and you can able to check the medical device classification product codes and how you can further do the product classifications of your devices with the help of these 2 links. I will be sharing you all the participant the slides, so you can just go on the links and you can able to see with respect to your devices what are the different product codes and how to further classify your product into a class 1, 2, and 3. The next slide. So I am just showing you one of the example of product classification database. I have taken the example of infusion pump. Now, if you see over here that the product code is FRN, so it means that the product code of the infusion pump is FRN, and for all the manufacturers worldwide, if they would like to register their product in USA FDA, so the product code for all the infusion pump will remain the same. It will be an FRN. And now in below you can able to see that the submission type 510K. It means that this product infusion pump, they need 510K. It is not a 510K exempted. If it is a 510K exempted, then it is written over here that it is a 510K exempted over there. Further to that, the regulation number. Here you can see that it is written 880.5725. So I have, as discussed earlier to you, that there are different parts, as I told you, that 21 CFR from 868 to 898, right? There are different parts. So the infusion pumps fall under the part of 21 CFR 880. And now if we go further under the 880, there are the different numbers which are already listed by the USA 510K, right? So depending upon the intended use, you can able to choose the number. For the infusion pump, the number is 5725. So the complete regulatory number for your product, now we can say that it is a 21 CFR 880.5725. And now with the help of this regulation number, you can able to identify the predicate devices also. Now with the help of product code and with the help of regulation number, you can able to identify the predicate devices for your products, which is going to be later on help you in preparation of the 510K application. Because whenever we are preparing the 510K application, the detail of predicate devices we have to give over there a complete comparison with respect to technical, clinical, and biological aspects. We have to give it with head-to-head comparisons with the predicate devices. Now further to go, here you can see that device class. Here it says the device class is class 2. It means that the infusion pump falls under the class of class 2, right? Further, you can see it's a GMP exempt. So the infusion pump is not a GMP exempted. It means that you have to implement the 21 CFR 820.20 into your system. If it is a GMP exempted, then it is written over there yes. So in that case, now you can say that infusion pump is having a product code FRN, regulation number 880.5725, which is class 2 devices, and it's require a GMP implementation into your system. So this is how you can further you can able to properly do the classification of your devices. Now next slide. So what do you do if you cannot determine the appropriate device classification? Suppose in many of the cases your product doesn't fit into any of the classifications, or you are not able to classify appropriately. So then there is a different program, we call it 513G program. With the help of that, you can able to ask directly the US FDA to the process of getting the 510K registration for your products. The next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so next slide. Now I will going to give you the overview of 510K program. So how the 510K program or the 510K registration will go hand on hand. Next slide. 510K is a pre-market notification. I'll already talk to you about that. Section 510K of Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic, the Food and Drug Cosmetic Act is come into picture. 21 CFR 807 subpart E talk about it. It is a marketing clearance applications. 510K are cleared. Allow FDA to determine substantial equivalence. A 510K is not a form, it's not an establishment registrations, it's not a device listing, and it's not a pre-market approval. So I had already talked to you about pre-market approval is something different, 510K is something different. Next slide. So one of the very important thing over here is what you mean by the subsequent equivalence. Now, demonstrations that a new devices as compared to a predicate devices has the same intended use and the same technological characteristics, or different in technological characteristics do not raise different questions regarding safety and effectiveness. It means that you can say that your product is subsequent equivalent to the predicate devices if you have a same intended use and if you have a same technological characteristics. However, if there's any difference, that difference will not going to have an impact with respect to safety, efficacy, and performance of your devices. Only in that case you can able to say that your product has a subsequent equivalent or having a predicate devices, or you can have a predicate device comparison. Only if it's have a same intended use or have a same technological characteristics. So identifications of predicate devices again very important for your sets of devices. Next slide. So as I already talked to you about what is a predicate device and illegally marketed device, previously cleared through a 510K process mainly, that is used for comparison to a new device for the purpose of determining subsequent equivalence. So it means that predicate device which already is being cleared by the 510K, and you are going to get that 510K number or product for the subsequent equivalent, as I already talked to you right now about, for the comparison head to head. So this is about the definition of a predicate devices. Next slide. So these are the typical reference you can able to check over there and have a better understanding about the different guidance document and how you can go for the subsequent equivalent of predicate devices. Next slide. Yeah. So this is a typical 510K decision making flow chart. Starting from the I have taken this from appendix A. I will be sharing you the entire PDF version of this flow chart, so you can have a better understanding because of the small size we are not able to see over there. So starting from the device intended use, you can able to say with the help of yes and no whether you will be requiring a 510K or you will be requiring a PMA rule or what are the different strategy. So depending upon this flow chart, the decision making flow chart, you can be able to determine the 510K route or which route you would like to go ahead with it. The next slide. So establishing subsequent equivalence. So what are the major decision points from the flow chart which I have shown to you? Is the predicate device legally marketed? You have to see that is the predicate device legally marketed? Do the device has the same intended use? Do the device has the same technological characteristics? Or if there is a difference, is there any difference in the safety and effectiveness, which I already talked to you about? There are two parts: are the method acceptable or the data demonstrates subsequent equivalence. So these are typical decision points which I have taken from the flowcharts, which will be going to have a direct impact on your 510K applications. The next slide. So when is that 510K is typically required? So introducing a device into the market, changing the indication for use of previously cleared devices, or making significant modifications to a previously cleared devices. So in these three scenarios, you are typically required to have a 510K for your products. The next slide. So again, these are the few other differences where you can go and check it in more detail. So I will be now discussing what are the different types of 510K submissions which are required. Next slide. A traditional 510K is required element as per the requirement of 21 CFR 807.87. It relies on the demonstrations of the subsequent equivalence. It means that you have to do a predicate device analysis over there. The traditional 510K method can be used under any circumstances. So it's mostly all the medical device manufacturers, they are using the traditional 510K method only, because they are are well known, well accepted by the US FDA government also. The abbreviated 510K and special 510K methods can only be used if certain criteria are met. So there are a different type of 510Ks I already talked to you about. So the traditional 510K are the most common used 510K method by all the medical device manufacturers worldwide. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so the abbreviated 510K. So the next type of 510K is called about the abbreviated. Is again the requirements of the element of 21 CFR 807.87. It relies on use of guidance document, special control, and recognized standards. We are only using the abbreviated 510K if the guidance document by the US FDA and if the recognized standard, it means the ISO or ASTM standards, are available for your product. In that case, only we are using the abbreviated 510K. Under certain conditions, sponsor may not need to submit the test data in an abbreviated. In many of the cases, the test data, like the validation data, they are not required to submit because all the guidance document and the recognized standards are already available for your sets of devices. So in that case, we can able to go for the abbreviated 510K. The next slide. Now the third type is the special 510K. Is again the requirements of the elements, what we call it 21 CFR 807.87. Device modifications to manufacturer's own legally marketed device. If you need to have any modifications of your devices which are been marketed or you have already cleared for the 510K, you can then apply for the 510K. Modification does not affect the intended use or fundamental scientific technology. If you do any changes, once you have got the 510K, but it will not have any modification in use, in that case you can able to go for a special 510K applications. No data is evaluated by the FDA. In that cases, the data will be not again be evaluated by the 510K, by the FDA for the special 510K, because you already have got the 510K clearance. You are just only doing certain modifications for in your application which you have already received. So these are typically three type of 510K where we are using it, depending and mostly we are using the traditional type of 510K. Next slide. Again, these are the different links how to prepare a traditional 510K abbreviated. You can able to go and check. Next slide. What do you do if you have a low or moderate risk devices which no identifiable predicate device? Suppose you don't have any predicate devices, but still you would like to go for the 510K applications. So in that case, we have to apply for the de novo classification, or you have to apply with the help of de novo route for the 510K applications. And next slide. Content of the 510K. What will be the typical content of the 510K? Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So the typical content of the 510K is, can you go back? Yeah. The content of the 510K will include a typical medical device user fee cover sheets, what we call it a form FDA 3061, where the sponsor or a medical device manufacturer, they have to submit a fee for the registration. So this sheet will say that you have already paid the US FDA and registration fee. Then the second document which is very important is CDRH pre-market review submission cover sheet, which is the point number 1 and 2. Already a set template is released by the US FDA government, which we have to follow it. Then we have to prepare the 510K cover sheets, then indication for use statements, then the 510K summary or 510K statements we have to prepare accordingly. Then the truthful and accuracy statements. Truthful and accuracy statements very important for the US FDA application 510K. It is very important. Why? Because if the US FDA inspectors or the reviewers find that you have breached or you have forged your data, in that case they have the right to on immediate basis cancel your 510K application. So that's why a truthful and accuracy statement is being signed by the medical device manufacturers who would like to go for the 510K. If they find at any point of time that you have forged any of your documents or it's not truthful, then they have the liability to cancel your 510K applications. And in many of cases you are not further allowed to go for the 510K application also. Now the class 3 summary and certifications, financial certification and disclosure agreements, then the device descriptions, proposed labeling, biocompatibility, software validations, EMI EMC testing data, all the bench testing data with respect to animal, clinical and bench testing. All these are the few documents which are mandatory to required to submit whenever we are going for the 510K application or whenever you are going for the submission of your documents for your 510K. Next slide. So the intended use and indication for use. So it means that general purpose of the device or its function and encompasses the indication for use. So so the intended use and indication for use are the two different things. Most of the manufacturers, they say that intended use is same as for the indication for use, but the intended use and indication for use are the two different terminology and there are two different things for your devices. So we have to define very clearly what is the intended use and what is the indication for use. So to see what you mean by the indication for use, you have to see as per the definition written in the 21 CFR 814.20 section B, section 3 and I, which describe the disease or condition that device will diagnose, treat, prevent, cure or mitigate, including a description of patient population for which the device is intended. So you have to see this definition and accordingly you have to prepare the indication for use for your devices. It must be consistent throughout your 510K applications, including the indications for use, statements, proposed labeling, etc. recommended format for indication for use statements is given in the form FBA 3881, a template already been released by the US FBA government. So this template is being followed by the worldwide medical device manufacturers. We have to follow the form FBA 3881. It will also help in identifying whether your product, your medical device is a prescription use device or is the over-the-counter use devices with the help of the form FBA 3881. So it's my request to all the startups, kindly define the intended use separately and indication for use separately if you would like to go for the 510K application for your products. Next slide. So 510K summary, high-level discussion on the content within the 510K must include element which is written in 21 CFR 807.92, must include sufficient details to provide an understanding of the basis for determination of subsequent equivalence. So it means that again I'm talking to you, I'm giving a major emphasis on the predicate devices because most of the 510K clearance will, the process will become very simpler if you have done the subsequent equivalence or predicate device analysis very accurately. The next slide. So the FDA recognized consensus standards, as I already talked to you about that, the FDA has released such an of the ISO standards or the different guidance document for the different of the products. So you have to identify that whether your products have the any of the consensus standard which is recognized by the FDA, and then accordingly you have to go for the 510K application or the any other performance testing or the validation testings. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. So FDA guidance documents. So now, yeah, FDA, as I talked to you about it, FDA had released few of the guidance documents for the few other devices. So which any of the medical device manufacturers they have to fulfill whenever they are going for the 510K. So the next slide I will be talking about you the guidance documents. Next slide, please. So now you can able to see that product classification database. Here you can see the recognized consistent standard which was released by the US FDA. I have taken the example of the infusion pump only. So now here you can say that there are around 4 consensus standard: ISO 7886 Part 2, 238625. So these are the standard which is already been approved by the US FDA. Right, and further you can able to see that in below you can see the guidance document, guidance for industry and FDA staff, total product life cycle infusion pump pre-market notification submission requirements. So here the US FDA they have already released a guidance document to prepare the 510K applications with respect to the infusion pump. So any of the manufacturers they can able to take the help of this guidance document to prepare the 510K applications. So I just giving a typical example of the what are the consistent standards which is recognized by the US FDA and what are the guidance document available for the infusion pumps. So depending upon your product, you have to identify whether the consensus standard is present or whether the guidance document is present or not, and accordingly you have to prepare your 510K applications. The next slide. Next slide. So I already talked to you about the device description, subsequent equivalent your decisions you have to provide in detail. The next slide, please. Now the labeling is one of the important requirements. So you have to fulfill the labeling requirement as per the 21 CFR 801 requirements. The copies of all the proposed labels, labeling, packet inserts, service manuals, instruction for use, advertising materials, and promotional materials. We have to submit it at a time of 510K application to the government. The direction for use should include a specific diagrams, warning, contraindications, and limitations. You have to provide in detail at the time of whenever we are submitting to the government. Labeling submitted should be a final draft. After you get the 510K approval, you cannot do any further modification on your labels. If you do any modification, then you have to again go for the for the resubmission of the few of the sections for the again reviewing or the labeling. Then the US FDA will charge accordingly to you. The next slide. So the performance testing, as I already talked to you about that, with respect to your product which you are manufacturing or going for the 510K, you have to identify what are the performance testings required for your products, and then accordingly you have to do the either animal testings, clinical testings, or the bench testing for your products. If any guidance document or any ISO standards are available, then you can able to use that guidance document or the ISO standards for conducting the performance testings. The next slide. So as I talked about the clinical testings, not all 510K require clinical data. If you have the same engineer used as per the predicate devices and the significant technological difference, in that case only you are required to go for the clinical data or clinical testings for your products. Next slide. So one of the very key considerations is information is complete and organized. Include a table of content, use tabs and the paginate properly. Utilize tables and graphs appropriately and effectively. Use visual aids whenever possible. Clearly identify the basic 510K requirements, whether it's a 510K summary indication for use whenever you are going for the 510K applications. Be consistent throughout the submissions. Your indication for use, contraindication should not talk different in one section and should have something different in different sections. So it should be coherent and consistent throughout the submissions. Follow current applicable guidance document and device specific checklists if it's already been available by the US FDA. So these are a few other considerations. The next slide. So you can, with respect to this difference, you can see the content of 510K and what are the format tips for the preparing of your 510K documents. The next slide. For the pre-submission for the 510K, the guidance document method, as I already talked to you about, the submit written formal request to the for the FDA for the pre-submission program. Right now, the US FDA, they have released a pre-submission program also, where before submission or your 510K, they can able to review your documents and then they can give you the feedbacks at free of cost. They will not charge anything. So depending upon the pre-submission feedback which you receive from the US FDA, you can able to modify your 510K application and then you can submit it to. Subject to e-copy requirements, and many a time the pre-submission may require an e-copy or may not be required an e-copy. It totally depends upon the at the time of submissions what the US FDA will going to ask to us. The next slide. The next slide, please. So the submission process I will be talking to you right now. The next slide. So you have to submit 2 copies of your 510K to the US FDA. One of your 2 copies might be submitted in electronic format. We call it an e-copy. We have to convert entire of your 510K application into e-copy. Or software is already been provided by the US FDA government. You have to follow that. You have to download that software, and with the help of the software, we have to convert the entire 510K application into an e-copy, and then only we have to submit the e-copy to the US FDA. FDA does not return the 510K submission after review. They will not going to return anything. You can able to mail depending upon the application type. You can able to submit it to, or you can mail them directly. Address for submissions, they are already been provided by the US FDA government. You can able to check on this link and can get the submission addresses also. Next slide. E-copy program is talking about a valid e-copy is requirement for the pre-market submissions. A CD or digital video scope or a flash drive can be able to submit it. E-copy is accompanied by a paper copy and a signed cover letter and the complete paper submissions. A question regarding e-copy requirement can be, you can have you can send directly an email to this email ID cdrh-ecopy@fda.hss.gov if you have any doubt with respect to e-copy program, how to do an e-copy or how to submit the e-copy to the US FDA. E-copy program for medical device submission is provided in this link. It's a very lengthy program, approximately around more than 5 to 10 pages. You can just read through and get an idea about the e-copy program by the US FDA. Next slide. So 510K user fee, 510K are subjected to user fee. User fee must be received on and before the time the application is submitted. FDA will not accept the 510K for filing if the fee is not paid. There's a standard user fee and a small business reduced user fee also. Next slide. Next slide, please. So 510K submission process, you can just see a typical timeline of 510K. Day 1, the FDA will receive the 510K submissions. Then by day 10, they can send an acknowledgement letter, or FDA send an hold letter if they find any unresolved issues with respect to the user fee or the e-copy. And by day 15, they will conduct an acceptance review, or they can have an RTA, or RTA mean they can also able to refuse to accept your applications. So by day 15, they can able to send that to you. By day 16, they can FDA conduct the substantiation review. It means that they will start the review process of their 510K applications. And then if they need any applications and they need any additional information, then they put your application on hold, and they will send you an email requesting the any further documentation with respect to the query they have it. Many of the cases, there will be an interactive review can also be happened with the help of Skype, or with the help of a dedicated tool published by the 510K. A one-to-one meeting also will be carried out by between the US FDA auditors and inspectors and the company or the manufacturer who has applied for the 510K. So by 90, FDA will send the MDUFA decision. MDUFA mean the decision FDA mean that whether you will be getting a 510K number or not. And by day 100, if MDUFA decision is not received by day 100, FDA provide the missed MDUFA decision communication that identify outstanding review issues. If you have any of the issues with respect to your application, then by day 100 they can able to send you that outstanding issues which we have to resolve as early as possible. So these are typical timeline of from day 1 to day 100. But typically, from my experience, typical timeline for getting the 510K applications from the US FDA is around 6 to 9 months. It's a typical timeline they are taking to get it cleared, the 510K. Or you have to say that a typical 9 to 10 months is a typical timeline. This figure I have taken is from directly from the US FDA, which they have published from day 1 to day 100. But usually it take around 6 to 9 months timeline to get it, the 510K. The next slide. Next slide, please. Next slide. I already talked to you about all these things. Next slide. The refuse to accept policy is very important. In many of cases, if you don't have proper documentations, so many of the cases, the refuse to accept policy that the US FDA, they can also refuse to take your application. They can refuse your application, and you have to again do the process from the beginning. So it's my request that kindly check that all documentation which you are preparing is accurately and fulfill all the requirements for the 510K. Otherwise, it will be very difficult to again resubmit your documents. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah. Next slide. Next slide. So the interactive review, I talked to you about that. As you already talked you about that, there will be an interactive review between the US FDA auditors and the manufacturers if they find any major discrepancy with respect to your product. So they will going to call for an interactive review also. And there will be no charge, but at the time of interactive review they are very much technical. So whenever you are going for interactive review, make sure that your entire team is present at the time of interactive review, because these people are very highly technical and they can ask in-depth questions to you at the time of interactive review. Next slide. They can also request for additional information. I already talked to you about that. If they are found any information which is missing into your application, they can ask for the additional information also. Next slide. Next slide. By the next slide. Next slide. Yeah, the 510K fee. So typical year, the USFD 510K review fees for the financial year 2020 is $11,594, and once you have got the 510K number, then after every year you have to submit the what we call it annual FBA establishment registration fee, and the fee for right now is $5,236. It is a typical fee that you have to pay to the US FDA for getting the 510K. Along with that, you have to go for the appointment of an US agent. So if you appoint an US agent, the per year fee of an US agent will range between $800 to $1,200 US. So typically these are the fees which is going to be a fixed fee which is going to be paid by any of the medical device manufacturers if you would like to go for the 510K. Next slide. 510K decisions. Next slide. So as I already talked to you about the subsequent equivalent decision, or there is no subsequent equivalent decision, then we have to go for a de novo application or declassification petition. We can able to file to the US FDA depending upon the ST or NEC decisions. Next slide. Next slide. So what happened after a device is cleared? The following are posted on the FDA public 510K database. So once you got the 510K clearance, then the subsequent equivalent letter will be get published on the US FDA databases. Indication for use statement is also being published by the US 510K database. And 510K summary is provided instead of 510K statement. If a 510K summary is provided, then the entire 510K summary of your company will be get published on the 510K databases. So these are the typical key content which can happen once you got the 510K cleared for your products. Next slide. So for today's session, we can able to know that how to classify your products and how to do a subsequent comparison or predicate device analysis. What are the typical content of the 510K if you would like to go for it, and what are the subsequent equivalent can then be legally marketed onto your devices. So these are the typical summary which we able to know from today's sessions. Next slide. Thank you. I'm being very quick into this sessions. Reason being, the 510K typically will take the entire day to teach, to have a well in-depth training. So since the constrained time, I am very quick. But we are planning to have more detailed discussion on the 510K depending upon the responses or depending on the in-depth queries we are receiving from your sites. So any other questions with any other participants, I can able to answer you right now.
Thank you, Siddharth. So we have some of the questions in the chat box.
Right.
Now we have a question from Jnana Krishnan. So he's asking, what will be the cost involved for getting a PMA and FDA for class 3 medical device and the duration to get the PMA?
For the duration to the PMA is around 2 years timeline, depending upon the product. If it's in a cardiology devices or a very higher risk device, if it's implantable and everything, so the timeline will vary accordingly. But the typical fee will range from is around $30,000 plus.
Okay, Siddharth. So I hope that will answer Jnana Krishnan's question. So we have a quick question from Balamurugan. He's asking is hearing aid comes under class 3 medical device?
If it's an implantable, right now a few other companies are also making implantable hearing aids with the duct coated into it. So in this type of devices will be falling under class 3. Otherwise, it will be a class 2 device. Depending upon the different technology, the technological they are employing it.
Okay, thank you, Siddharth. So next we have question from Mohana Preeti. So Mohana Preeti, can you please unmute yourself and go ahead with the question?
Hi, good Mr. Siddharth. I want to know about the SAMD, software as medical device. How to identify the benefit for these software as medical device?
How to identify a predicate device? To identify the predicate device for software, you have to see that what is the intelligent use and everything. If you can able to provide me more information about your software as a medical devices, then I can help you in identifying the product, the predicate devices, and what are the classification and the I need to know your device, the software first.
Okay, our software is into ICU model. Like we remotely monitor patients by fetching the data from the medical device.
Okay, so it's my request that Mona, if you can contact me after the sessions, because it will going to a lot of time to understand your product and further help you in identifying the predicate devices. So you can contact me after the session. I can help you out in identifying the predicate devices for your product.
Okay.
And CMA is not required. Your product will be a class 2 devices in most of the cases.
Okay, sure.
And duration to obtain the FDA for the SAMAD is around 9 months. You can say 9 months is typical timeline you can have to do.
Sorry, I don't get you to that. Like, what is the duration?
9 months, 6 to 9 months is typical timeline.
Okay, even for SAMDs also.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, thank you.
Questions? Hello.
Hello. Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, we have few questions from Jnana Krishnan in the chat
Yeah.
box. So, Jnana Krishnan, can you please unmute yourself and you can ask the questions?
Yeah, I just want to know what are the electrical safety standards required for PMA and FDA? Is there any difference on safety standards?
No, there is no any difference. You have to follow the ISO 60601 only. There is no any difference with respect to that.
Okay. Second thing is calibration standards like NABL, if I get it done and then if I submit along with the device, FDA and FIT and approval, is it acceptable?
NABL is okay. NABL is okay. NABL is fine. There's no any issue in submission of the NABL acceleration standards too. But but your third question is that about the validation test done at the CSIR ETDC. So now they might not get accepted. They need the the CB certified laboratory only. All the laboratories which come under the CB schemes and having all the proper accreditations for the electrical testings. From that laboratory only, the US FDA government, they can accept that test validation data.
Yeah, laboratories with 17025 can are acceptable.
17025 is acceptable. Along with that, other accreditation like the CB scheme accreditation is also required.
So, can I get the list of this classification and the product code list by mail?
No, for the product code you have to see with respect to your product. There are the thousands of product codes. And there is no any table is released by the US FDA government. You have to go online and you have to put your product name over there, and then you have to get the product code and the device class. So if you let me know what is your product, I can help you out in identifying the predicate device and product code and classification. What is your product?
Product is ENT workstation.
It's ENT workstation. Okay, fine. Okay. I will help you out in doing the identification of the product code and everything.
Yeah. Can I get your mail ID and details, sir, so that I'm able to get in touch with you?
Yeah, Miss Archana can able to provide you all the details, and also in the slides which I'm going to share, the email ID and the contact details are present.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. So, at the interest of time, we'll take the last question by Surankar Datta. Datta, can you please unmute yourself and you can go ahead with your question?
Yeah, hi, good evening. My question was that like we were developing a machine learning algorithm using ultrasound to detect cardiovascular mortality. So the ultrasound machine is already there, and the predicate device is obviously an ultrasound machine. So for that, what kind of a clearance are we looking at? Like, what is the process for doing that, where we're using artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so you had a software, right? You have prepared artificial and ML based software, right? Software.
Yeah, we are preparing. Yeah.
So you are only preparing a software, or you are going to integrate the software into any of your hardware?
We are going to incorporate it into the hardware and into a point of care device. Yeah.
or into a point of care devices. So then what will the final product will be?
The final product is going to be a point of care device in which the software is already incorporated, and it is going to use our algorithm to predict mortality.
What type of modalities?
It's cardiovascular mortality.
Okay, so then your product will coming under 21 CFR. There's one cardiology section which I already talked about.
Yeah.
Then
Okay.
under the cardiology section, then we have to see that. And if it's a radiology, then we have to see that whether it's falling under the cardiology or the radiological sections, which is most appropriate. So depending upon that case, we have to identify the product code and then the classification. And if there's any guidance document, then you can go further for your 510K application or any type of validation studies.
Okay.
So because your topic is also very lengthy and it requires a very brainstorming, I cannot just give you right now that. Yeah, so we can able to contact you, or you can contact to me. We can have a more detailed discussion with respect to your product, because it will require at least 4 to 5 hours to sit onto your product and understand and then you can able to classify only.
Yeah, correct. All right, I'll do that. Yeah.
Fine. Okay.
Thank you.
Which class does a non-invasive glucose monitor comes under? The non-invasive glucose monitor comes under the classification of IVD. So yeah, so it's class 2 devices as per the requirement of US FDA.
Thank you, Siddharth.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you, Siddharth. So before we wrap up the session, I request all the participants to please fill the feedback form for us to improve the upcoming knowledge user sessions. I would also make a note that we are hosting an Ask Me Anything series on the coming Thursday at 5 p.m. The topic for the session would be Ask Me Anything on Building an Organization by Lakshmi Narayanan, who's a co-founder at Cognizant. So hope your participation over there. And thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, Siddharth, for your time.
Thank you.
It was really great session. We'll be posting the sessions video on our YouTube channel. Hope it is fine with you.
Yeah, it's absolutely fine.
Okay, Siddharth.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.